Hi, welcome to all of you. Sorry, I don't have a video feed, just a still image, but Liza has a nice spot in the apartment and I'm sitting in a dark corner. So it's only fair, of course, but that's why I'm explaining my still image. We in the North Brooklyn chapter place a high value on political education. We think it's important to develop our understanding of history and theory, not only because they're important in themselves, because it makes us better political actors. Our main focus for political education is our bi-weekly night school. The first on why you should be a socialist is coming up on Tuesday, September 28th. And we'll have more to say about that a little later. Tonight marks the launch of a new series of socialist skills workshops, how to write persuasively, argue persuasively, and the like. Tonight's speaker, Liza Featherstone, is a DSA member and a longtime journalist. She's been writing about labor, gender, politics in general, all kinds of things for quite some time. She is a columnist for Jacobin and the New Republic, where she writes about the psychology of climate change. She also teaches journalism at NYU and at Columbia's School of International Public Affairs. At Columbia, she teaches non-journalists how to write for a general audience, the skills of knowing your audience, for example, and convincing your readers of your deep correctness. And I think she's going to be drawing on that experience tonight. So here's Liza Featherstone.
Thanks, Doug. Carrington, do I just jump right in, or does anyone need to do anything else first?
No, you're good. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Here I go. So the first thing to say about the op-ed is that its purpose is to intervene in an existing discussion. So there are lots of different ways to start a whole new discussion, or to present an information or idea that is 100% new to your audience. You might, to do that, you might have a protest, write a long feature article, a whole book, a documentary film, even a YouTube video, a deep canvas, a political education campaign. Many ways that we can introduce our fellow humans to new ideas. The op-ed is not one. The op-ed is really a way to intervene in a discussion, a public discussion that is already happening. And I think you'll see as we talk through what the op-ed is and how to do it, you'll see why it is such a targeted and specific form. By the way, I've put, for reference, I put a couple links to examples of recent op-eds by socialists, both so you can see that it can be done, and also because I'm just going to refer to them a little bit here and there throughout my remarks, and you might want to read them later on. So the op-ed is a good art form for socialists to master because we don't usually have the means to buy huge TV ads or pay for PR campaigns, some of the other ways that the ruling class gets their opinions across. And most socialists also don't have other ways, be it skills, contacts, social capital, or experience, to get access to the mainstream media. The op-ed is structured to allow media access to outsiders, albeit in an extremely careful and controlled way, very much on their terms, on the terms of the mainstream media, which is part of its limitations. The name comes from, the name is short for opposite the editorial page, which you'll notice right away is a little old-fashioned, because most of us don't even read newspapers that way anymore, with the editorial on one side and the op-ed on the other side. But in the old days of print media, and for those of us who still read print newspapers, which I actually do, you would open your newspaper and the official line of the newspaper would be on the editorial side, this side. And the outside opinion, I know I see someone says, wow, I thought it meant opinion editorial. You're not alone, Christian. Everybody thinks that. Like that's because it is the opinion page. So it would make sense that op would be short for opinion, but actually no, opposite the editorial page. And that's as you'll see from the history, that sort of makes sense. But the op-ed as a term is also kind of dying out because we don't have this structure, this layout necessarily anymore. We have all kinds of we access things in a much more disembodied, diffuse, separate way. We're not necessarily consuming the newspaper as a whole thing. So some of the information, just by way of background, that I'm going to give comes from an article called "A Profitable Public Sphere?" by a communications scholar named Michael Sokolow. The anti-capitalist spin on it, however, is mine. I don't want to target him with any of that. So in 1955, John Oakes, a member of the New York Times editorial board, had a friend who worked for the Suez Canal Company as a publicist. The publicist wanted to write an article explaining the Suez Canal's company's position on the Egyptian government's takeover of the canal. Oakes was sorry, Oakes, being a member of the ruling class, was sorry that there was nowhere to publish such an article. And this inspired him to think about how to create a part of the newspaper for outside opinions. It's always important to notice how much in the media world has been driven by the public relations industry and by capitalist interests. Notice the origin story of the op-ed is not John Oakes had a friend whose landlord wouldn't fix his ceiling and was eager to tell his story, right? That was not the origin, although we can sometimes use it to tell such stories now. But institutional change is really slow, even for people with such conventional ruling class ideas as John Oakes had. It didn't happen in the 50s. The New York Times did not start the op-ed page then. In the 60s, Oakes was still arguing for an op-ed page, but the reasons had changed. There was so much upheaval in the larger society, people in the streets protesting the Vietnam War, demanding civil rights. And on the other hand, there were conservatives calling themselves or being called the silent majority, voting for Nixon, claiming that they weren't being heard. They were, so both groups, the right and the left, being very skeptical of the mainstream media for actually kind of similar reasons. Both groups saw it as elitist and with a liberal bias. In this context, the idea of the op-ed page took on a different purpose, a place for people outside the media establishment to be included. And also the Times editors were troubled by all the division and upheaval in the larger society, and they thought, well, maybe this will be a place people can make rational arguments. So as we now know, good luck with that. But that was part of the intention. However, when it finally happened was 1970, and it was more for it was more for financial reasons in the end. The Times had raised the newsstand cost of the paper and therefore was worried about losing more readers, and so needed to bring in more revenue, and also thought that with all of the the controversies going on in this highly engaged time, these opinions, a section in the paper for opinions, would be attractive to advertisers and would make money. So while writing op-eds, when we write op-eds, we feel very civic-minded, and it is a civic-minded activity, but the form does originate in the need for the newspaper to legitimate itself outside of a liberal elite bubble, and also to sell papers, sell ads, and make money. Almost immediately, capitalists saw more effectively than anti-war protesters how to use it. ExxonMobil began buying ad space, publishing its own views on the issues of the day, which were paid advertising but looked like op-eds, and the advertorial was born. When we use the op-ed then, we are working to deploy a tradition that has often worked better for the ExxonMobils or Henry Kissingers of the world, but of course that is true of a lot of democratic engagement under capitalism. Today, people don't really read op-eds as much on a separate page. We encounter them posted to Facebook or Twitter, or as part of a Google search. Interestingly, the New York Times this year abolished the use of the word op-ed, noting that it was outdated because in the digital space. And actually have to some extent abolished the phenomenon in deciding instead to have more in-house columnists and a guest essay, though there are some op-eds as well as longer essays in the Sunday Review section. But as a form of written intervention, the op-ed will live on. Many publications still have them. And even when we write things that are not op-eds, many of the persuasive strategies we're about to discuss will still make sense. So the structure of an op-ed, the structure is your opinion followed quickly by supporting facts. A larger outline will usually look something like this. You have a lead, which is, it could be something catchy, could be a short anecdote, or you could just go directly into your argument. But one thing that your opening must do is it must connect your argument to something happening in the news cycle. That's very important. You should say exactly what your argument is in a sentence or two. Do not be subtle. In fact, if you find your argument can't be stated in a sentence or two, after heroic effort, your argument might be too complicated for an op-ed. Again, an op-ed is not a nuanced form. It's a pretty simple form. If anyone wants to drop a thesis sentence or two into the chat, we can take a look, like an argument you'd like to make. You don't have to have the rest of the op-ed in your mind, just any argument you might like to make. Feel free to drop it in the chat and we'll take a look. After you establish your argument, you want to provide evidence. Leftists should study political economy. Excellent thesis. But we probably want to think about something that will appeal more to a mainstream audience, since that's talking about an intervention into the mainstream media. But I love it and totally agree. Joe Manchin is a loser. Good. Okay. So the state legislature shouldn't preempt local laws. Oh, good wonky one. Wonky arguments are policy wonky arguments are very good in an op-ed form. Oh, why the filibuster must go. Okay, so why the filibuster must go. Let's focus on that one for a minute. Oh my goodness, we have so many good arguments. The U.S. invasion of Afghanistan did not help Afghan women. Very good one too. Green New Deal for public schools, also, yeah, very good. So let's focus for a minute on why the filibuster must go. So after you introduce your argument, you want to think about evidence. So Doug, pineapple doesn't belong on pizza. He's always trying to start some kind of controversy. So evidence. When you think about what is supporting evidence, you want to think about numbers, data, anecdote, experience, your own. A lot of people don't think of that immediately, but your own experience can definitely count as evidence. History, often a good source of evidence. Logic, if this, then this, also often good evidence. Anyone want to give us some good evidence as to why the filibuster should go? And anyone got any good evidence? Any supporting arguments there? Just drop them into the chat. Values. Somebody asked, what about values as a form of argument? Yeah, David. Yeah, democratic. Yep. Appeals to shared values that you know your audience share. That's a really good point. Values that that are particular to your group, like socialist values, may not be a good form of argument in a mainstream context, but shared values like democracy and so forth, yeah, for sure. Okay, the filibuster is essentially anti-democratic. Excellent, excellent piece of use of values, shared values as evidence. The filibuster as currently employed appears nowhere in the Constitution and is used to block popular legislation. Excellent, excellent pieces of evidence. To tackle the climate crisis, we need a functioning government, and 50 senators belong to a party that does not believe in government. Also very good evidence. Yeah, these are very, very good uses of logic and also evidence. Yeah, very good. For evidence, instances of legislation that would have benefited society as a whole, but were blocked by the filibuster. Oh boy, we have a lot of examples of that that we can elaborate on. Yeah, very good. So this is, yeah, these are very good ideas about how to use evidence to support the abolish the filibuster argument. So once we do that, we then move to a section of your op-ed that is sometimes, we sometimes joke, Walter says, we've got most of the op-ed written, we're getting there, yes. So then we come to a section that is somewhat jokingly called to be sure. I'm joking because to be sure is a pompous kind of phrase that I would never actually advocate using in your op-ed, but it is the part where you acknowledge an argument on the other side and knock it down. So the purpose of this, it's sometimes used to, it can look high-minded, like, oh, look, we're considering the arguments on the other side. That's so open-minded. But we're not doing it to be polite or fair. The op-ed writing is ideological combat. We are not trying to be inclusive of our opponent's arguments. We're bringing them up in order to destroy them. But but at the same time, we're empathizing with our readers who might hold these opinions or share these questions or qualms or concerns. We want to reach those readers. So that is, so the purpose of the to be sure is it shows an understanding of your opponent and probably of many of your readers. But at the same time, it's like martial arts. We are using our opponent's strength against them. What that implies is you do not want to use, you do not want to put a weak argument in your to be sure. You don't want to put what is called a straw man. A straw man is something that nobody really thinks, or is just kind of is just kind of a kind of a weak a weak hypothetical objection. You'll notice in the two articles I linked to have some good examples of a use of to be sure. So Elizabeth Brunig, in her op-ed on It's Time to Try Socialism, you'll notice she brings up some of the usual objections to socialism, totalitarian stereotypes about it, and also the objection that, well, not every problem is caused by capitalism, and she dispenses with them pretty quickly. Like she says, yeah, but the totalitarian socialism isn't what we want, and that's not what people who argue for democratic socialism are arguing for. And she says, yeah, not every problem is caused by capitalism, and that really points out that really isn't a very good argument against socialism. In the other op-ed that I linked to by Caitlyn Penner, which is an argument, a much more specific argument, she argues that we want Sia Weaver on the planning board. She's referring to that this was an op-ed written when Jumaane Williams had nominated a DSA housing activist, Sia Weaver, to the planning board, and Caitlyn Penner writes an op-ed in City Limits supporting that idea. She does one of my favorite uses of the to be sure, one of my favorite types of ninja argument tricks. She says, she points out that the real estate industry doesn't want Sia Weaver on the board, and she says, yes, the real estate industry doesn't want Sia Weaver on the board, and that just shows how independent she is of those interests, and that is exactly why she is needed. And so she turns like something that could be an objection from a mainstream media point of view into a strength. And that's really one of the most effective tactics in a to be sure, is to zero in on an argument that they have and make it actually an argument for your own side. So let's look again at the chat at some of the arguments that people had, and let's see if there's if we've got a to be sure. Okay, what would be well, since we were doing so well with the filibuster, what would be a good counter to what's the best argument against abolishing the filibuster? The filibuster is a venerated American political tradition. Yeah, I think that is definitely a good example, because that is one of the most, because it is commonly thought of, although it's actually not that, I don't know if it's really venerated. Republicans will be able to pass regressive policies. Yeah. Oh, you mean by abolishing the filibuster, meaning if they were in power? Yeah, okay, that's a good one. I understand what you mean. Yep, filibuster allows minority opinions to be heard. Yep, yep. Okay, these are good. Pat, hi Pat. It guards against tyranny of the majority. Yep, that's yeah. So these are definitely strong non-straw arguments, in the sense that they're strong in the sense that they're widely held, and they have some serious substance. The filibuster protects against extreme legislation. Another good one. So you need to you need to pick one or two good ones, and explain why they are either wrong, like commonly held but wrong, or why they are actually reasons, why they are actually in fact reasons to abolish the filibuster. And so then, so after that, your op-ed should go into a call to action, if that's not obvious from the argument. Sometimes it already is, and should then generally conclude with a memorable ending. So like you notice, if you look at Liz Brunig's piece, she says, "We still have the chance to shape the future we want. I suggest we take it." Nice, pithy, closer that drives her point home, and that's you really want to look at that. Remember that people are often going to remember the ending of your piece, even if they don't remember what you wrote in the rest of it. And so it's really particularly important for those last lines to really drive home your argument. A few other things that you should take care to do in your op-ed. I should also say a common pitfall of the "to be sure" is if you zero in on a convincing counter argument, but then don't sufficiently address it, that can create confusion in your piece. So say you're like, oh, the filibuster prevents the tyranny of the majority, but then you kind of give a lame or insufficient argument against that. Then you've introduced this doubt into your piece, and you don't want to do that. You want to introduce the doubt and then dispense with it. Like that's the purpose of the "to be sure." So for as far as other things you should be sure to do, that having a timely hook is really important, and I want to emphasize that, because as socialists, we tend to be concerned with things that are always happening, right? Capitalists are always exploiting workers. That has been happening for as long as there has been capitalism. Like we tend to be concerned with these really timeless and structural things. But what's happening, the mainstream media is concerned with what is happening right this minute. So in order to engage it, we have to be concerned with what is happening right this minute, and hopefully what is happening right this minute, and how does it, how do we use what is happening right this minute to make socialist arguments? You want to avoid cliches. And a cliche is an expression that you are used to seeing, as George Orwell wrote. If you are used to seeing it, you probably want to take it out. And it's like, and it can be hard to avoid that, because the things we're used to reading are often the phrases that are floating around in our minds. But that's what you need to do. You need to look for fresh language, for fresh ways of putting things. David Diaz says, what about changing the media agenda or framing of issues? Yeah, so the op-ed isn't the best place to change the media agenda. You usually need to do something bigger to change the media agenda. You need to block traffic, or shut down the city, or have a big campaign, or if you're thinking of what kind of media can change the media agenda, a documentary film, like an investigative, find an investigative reporter to uncover something, that kind of thing can change the media agenda. The op-ed is too short and too small to really change the media agenda, and it's too embedded in media conventions. Like it was born out of it was born in the most conventional possible way, and there are ways that we can use it, but we can't use it too fundamentally. Pointing out that something the media hasn't said enough, that is exactly what the op-ed is good for. Yes, like you are, the conversation already exists, and you are pointing out something. You are pointing out something that a perspective, an opinion, a lens that has been absent. So yeah, you can't start a new conversation, but you can bring a new perspective. Good distinction. So a few other things. It is good. Humor is good. And that can be hard because a lot of times, very often as leftists, we're concerned with very serious issues. But many serious issues can also have a funny dimension. Definitely look for that. Clear opinion, take a side, do not equivocate. Again, there is space for nuance in our arguments with people. In nuances, there's place for nuance in many different forms of writing. The op-ed does not really have room for nuance, and I cannot emphasize that enough. Make really clear and relatively simple arguments. Indignation is good. A lot of times people think that that they should tone that down. I don't think that's the case. I think passion can work very well in an op-ed. Short, not longer than 800 words. 750 words is usually good. Yes, a push against standard framing. An op-ed is a good place to look for to change the framing of an issue. You just can't really introduce a whole new issue or a whole new conversation. Another thing that's important is as when you begin the op-ed, you need to grab the reader right away. No throat clearing, no preamble, no digressions. You really have no room for digressions. And a lot of people actually put digressions at the top. A lot of people have trouble getting to the point. I think that's something that often happens when people are new to doing this. That it can be sometimes if we're nervous or feel apologetic about writing or about our argument, it can take a while to get to the point. That's totally fine in your rough draft, but then when you're reading it over, take that out. It's all like that's all throat clearing, and you really want to have your argument right up top. Remember, what your sixth grade English teacher said to you: showing is better than telling. That is true. You need catchy details. So we all agree our government should spend money on childcare and not on making war on other countries. But instead of saying just that, you can talk about, talk about a particular tank in Afghanistan. How much did that cost? How many daycare workers' salaries could the cost of that tank cover? Those are the kinds of details that linger in the mind. Very good question. Nell wants to know, are you writing to the person or people you're trying to change the mind of, or the general public calling on them to take action? That is a question for the op-ed writer. Who is your audience? That is a super important question, and the mainstream media often includes both of those audiences. Sometimes you are really writing more for the politician. Sometimes you are writing more for the people. And politicians and policymakers do read op-eds. So it's not necessarily a crazy idea to address them if you think that you have some points that can change their mind. On the other hand, it's more likely that people in the general public are going to read your op-ed, and so you definitely, so that's a strong argument to pitch your argument to more of a general public as well. But when you think about the general public, you also want to think, which public? Like, are you writing for a conservative audience? Like, are you writing for does your audience include small business owners, homeowners? Is your are you pitching more the working class part of the reading public? You have to you definitely want to think about what is the publication I'm writing for, who reads it, and of the people who read it, who am I most hoping to appeal to? Because not all points and not all arguments are going to work for all audiences. David Diaz, do you research your audience? You absolutely should research your audience. I mean, some audiences don't really need to be researched. You kind of know that who reads the New York Times. You know that it's upper middle class, very educated liberals, and then it's whoever else sees it on the internet. You know what I mean? Like you just know that's the audience of the New York Times. You know that the New York Post is a bit more conservative in its audience. It's maybe New Yorkers who are maybe a bit more likely to vote for Trump than some other members of the reading public in New York. It might be more like police officers, people like that. If you are writing for some small town paper, the audience is people in that small town. If you live in that small town, your audience better than anyone else does. So you definitely have to think about the audience, and if you don't know who the readership is, you definitely want to ask someone who does know. Maybe you're writing for like a regional newspaper, and you don't know that region, but maybe you have a friend who lives there. Like, what's it like? Will people be open to this argument or no? Oh, can you even get op-eds in conservative rags as a socialist? Sure, you definitely can. Let's see. Do you go beyond imagine your audience into actually researching? Sure. I mean, if you don't know who the audience is of a publication, yeah, you definitely want to you definitely want to do some research on the audience. I mean, you usually you can also, the best way to research who the audience is, honestly, is usually to read the publication, because you can tell. You can tell if these arguments are pitched to a very educated group or not so much, or not so much. Is this written at like a ninth grade reading level, or is it written at more of a college graduate reading level? Like all of those things are there primarily conservative arguments in the publication, or are they primarily more liberal arguments? You can tell by reading the publication how they conceive of their audience, and that's really one of the best ways. You should not so much you should actually you should not write for publications without being somewhat immersed in the publication itself. Just to like a couple more things, we're going to move to breakouts in a second. You can write in the first person. A lot of people think that's not okay. It really is. If your perspective or experience is relevant, and it often is. No jargon. If you're a specialist in a particular field, avoid using the kinds of words that normally only appear in journals for other specialists. For leftists, that means don't use words or phrases that only other leftists use, especially without defining them. A few things that come to mind might be neoliberalism, intersectionality, cis white men, and don't say any of those things in an op-ed. Those are not general interest, like general media types of words. Don't use long laundry lists of things that leftists say to avoid getting yelled at by other leftists. The mainstream media reader doesn't care about any of that. So you just like, you like, just again know your audience. There's a place for all those things. There's a place for the word neoliberalism. There's a place for those long laundry lists. We all should engage them. Is petty bourgeois okay? A perfect example. It's always great to attack the petty bourgeoisie, but if you're doing it in an op-ed, you just need to find a different way to say it. Never write to rebut or counter a particular article. Leftists love to do that. Like, I'm going to write a whole article to rebut someone else's article. In a mainstream context, that is too inside baseball, and wouldn't work. Though again, there's a place for that. Lastly, establish expertise. That does not mean that you have a PhD in the subject, but if you do have a doctorate in the subject you're writing about, by all means, find a way to let us know. But if you're writing about healthcare and you're a nurse, if you're writing about education and you're a teacher, you're writing about Haiti and you're from there, tell us. Like, all of that adds authority to your work. So those are some of the things to keep in mind. So here's what I want to do in our breakout group. We're going to be in actually, now I don't know how many people we are, so not sure how big our groups will be, but have everyone in the group write down an argument you want to make. 1 or 2 sentences. Some of you have already dropped them in the chat. You can use the same argument you dropped in the chat if you like. The group exercise is called fan/hater. I mean, and this is like in a made-up world where fans and haters are like really intelligent and making thoughtful points. You're going to, so everyone's going to have a thesis. You're going to select somebody in the group who is particularly eager to share their thesis. They will share it with the group. The group's role will first be supportive fan, like, yes, Queen, interesting, tell me more. And the person making the argument will will elaborate, will provide evidence to support their argument. Then your group will turn on them. Obviously, this is just pretend. They will turn on them and be haters. Nah, I don't buy it, and will raise specific objections. And you will be asked, and you will need to respond to the specific objections. This is to get you to think through the process of creating a thesis, providing evidence, and imagining what the counter arguments are and responding to them. Eventually, when you do this often, you'll be you'll have the fan and hater in your own head, and you'll be able to shape your arguments in this way. Let's see. Okay, hold on. Sorry, we are just about to create these groups. Let's see. Okay. All right, let's
so we can make breakout groups, but I think first we wanted to say something about community agreement. So when you're ready, Liza, Obi will.
okay.
Can you let
No,
Obi know?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, Obi, go ahead.
Just the community agreements. Everybody's here to learn. Please assume good intentions and be comradely. And if I know we're playing a game right now, but be brief and keep the context and anecdotes to a minimum.
Thanks, Obi. Liza, are we ready to go to groups, or do you have another tip to give someone?
No, that's good. That's good.
Okay, do you want to remind really quickly, like what the three acts they're doing, I think are?
Yes, let's recap. So so you will jot down an essence of an argument, 1 or 2 sentences, and somebody in the group will volunteer to share their argument with the group. The group will first act as fans and say, "Oh, wow, great, fascinating, tell me more," and perhaps ask specific supportive questions that will encourage the person to elaborate and provide evidence supporting their argument. Then the group will will briefly impersonate haters, and they will and the haters will say, I don't buy it, and will bring up objections to your argument, and the person making the argument will need to find ways to counter these objections. Carrington, the question is, how long total for the breakout groups? I think do we say 20 minutes?
Yeah, I think it's, so it's 8 o'clock right now. How about we go till 8:15, 8:20? What do you think? 8:15 or 8:20? We
Yeah.
want to have a little chance for discussion afterwards, so maybe 8:15.
Yeah,
Is that long enough?
I think that's good. So you will definitely have time for one person in your group to give their arguments with the fans and haters. If people are super succinct, you might have time for two, but you should definitely aspire to thoroughly treat one person's argument.
Okay, excellent. So I'm opening up the rooms. People are just automatically being assigned. And let's see, I just recreated. Here you go.